Putin has made it clear that his sights go way beyond Ukraine, in fact, to the former Warsaw Pact countries too. So there is great concern, and I think this is why people are suggesting that we should unfreeze all of the $300 billion of Russian assets that were frozen and start using them to give money to Ukraine so it can purchase weapons, so that its economy doesn't further deteriorate. So I think extreme measures would have to be taken if an agreement is made where Putin gets most of what he wants.
Earlier in his inauguration speech, there was no mention of President Trump's goal of ending the war in Ukraine within 6 months. No mention of NATO or his efforts to ensure that other NATO countries increase their spending on defence. But the new president did talk about his overall objective of getting out of global wars.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
Well, Donald Trump is just arriving at that big inauguration rally. Angela Stent is a former US National Intelligence Officer for Russia and a former senior NATO advisor. Good evening to you, Angela.
Good evening.
One of the big concerns here in the UK and across the Western alliance has been about Donald Trump's whole approach to the war in Ukraine. There was almost no mention of it in the inauguration speech.
No, I think the only foreign policy things he talked about were taking back the Panama Canal. He didn't even talk about, purchasing or taking over Greenland or annexing Canada. So there was very little about foreign policy. And on the Ukraine issue, he used to say he would end the war in 24 hours. Now he says it's 6 months. His Ukrainian envoy has said that General Kellogg has said that they can end it in 3 or 4 months, but there are no specifics yet.
And we've had already this announcement that he's signing a whole series of executive orders allowing him to implement some of those key policies. He's expected to do some of that right in front of that crowd there in Washington tonight. But do you think there will be concern, perhaps within NATO circles, that there is no commitment there to continue supporting Ukraine, that there is no commitment there to even continue America's commitment and the amount that it spends and the amount of military might that it puts into NATO?
Oh, yes, there's great concern. I've just returned last week from a conference at Oxford University where we had various officials there expressing these concerns. I mean, Trump tried to pull the United States out of NATO during his first term. Now he says, if you don't spend 5% of your GDP on defense, we're not going to defend you if you're attacked. So I think NATO has been cognizant of what this might mean for some months now, and they've been discussing among themselves what they can do, and particularly in the case of Ukraine, where they can step in if American assistance, which I think it probably will dry up, what they can do. There's talk of possibly at some point after some kind of a ceasefire deploying European troops there. I mean, it's all theoretical, but they understand very well that Europe itself will have to take up much of the burden if they don't want Russia to completely win this war.
Yeah, and when you hear those list of priorities from Donald Trump and Ukraine, which is such a high priority of the British government here in the UK, that has got to be a matter of real concern, hasn't it, for other NATO allies? It's something that President Macron in France has been talking about, and President Zelensky knows how dependent his country is on that military and financial support from Ukraine at a time when Russia is actually gaining ground.
Yes, I mean, I think, again, everyone is aware of the danger. And of course, if Trump and his envoys settle for an agreement which essentially meets most of Putin's demands, and many of the Republican supporters of Trump have already echoed those, then I think the danger to continental Europe, at least, of further Russian aggression is real. I mean, Putin has made it clear that his sights go way beyond Ukraine, in fact, to the former Warsaw Pact countries too. So there is great concern, and I think this is why people are suggesting that we should unfreeze all of the $300 billion of Russian assets that were frozen and start using them to give money to Ukraine so it can purchase weapons, so that its economy doesn't further deteriorate. So I think extreme measures would have to be taken if an agreement is made where Putin gets most of what he wants.
Yeah, and do you think President Putin will be looking at Donald Trump's record when he was last in the White House and thinking that this could be an opportunity for him perhaps to get a favourable deal that leaves him in control of large chunks of what was Ukrainian territory, which he currently occupies?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, Putin today said he's willing to meet with Trump. It'll be good if the relations are restored. And, on the other hand, of course, he said that he will only negotiate if Ukraine essentially accepts all of the Russian conditions, which is the loss of territory, it's never to join NATO, demilitarization of parts of Ukraine. But I think Putin understands that Trump really wants to make a deal. Trump has indicated that he would like the Nobel Peace Prize, which is why he talked about himself as a peacemaker. But I think for Trump, that would be a deal. And any deal, I think, is going to give quite a lot to Russia. And if you look at the history of what happened between Trump and Ukraine, Zelensky, particularly in the first Trump administration, it was very difficult. Trump was impeached for denying, and of course not kicked out of office, but still impeached for denying Ukraine assistance. And I think Putin looks at all of this, and I think he realizes Trump admires him. You never hear Trump criticizing really either Putin or Xi Jinping. He only seems to criticize the U.S.'s allies. And I think Putin has taken that in too.
Angela Stent, former US National Intelligence Officer for Russia, former senior NATO advisor. Great to speak to you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.